Today on Truth Be Told, we step away from the paranormal and dive straight into one of the most shocking and misunderstood events in American history. April 14th, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln is shot at Ford's Theater, just days after the Civil War effectively ends. But what if the story we've all been told is only part of the truth? Most people know John Wilkes Booth, but behind him, a network, a conspiracy, a group of unlikely and often overlooked players who helped shape one of the most pivotal moments in American history. Was this a careful orchestrated plot or a chaotic plan that somehow succeeded? And how deep did this conspiracy really go? Tonight, we go beyond the headlines, beyond the history books, and beyond John Wilkes Booth. Joining me today is acclaimed historian and author Dr. Kate Clifford Larson, whose deep research uncovers the hidden figures, untold stories, and uncomfortable truths behind Lincoln's assassination, including a controversial role of Mary Surratt and the network that made it all possible. If you think you know the story, think again. Well, I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, Dr. Kate Clifford Larson. Well, we are back for another Truth Be Told episode, and we're going to drop the paranormal off this week, but we're going to do Truth Be Told conspiracy, and it's one of the original conspiracies that just passed. In fact, April 14th is when Abraham Lincoln was shot, and I think 15th is when he actually died. And today we have the amazing and the very relaxed from Cape Cod, Dr. Kate Clifford Larson. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
You know, I'm great. I am great, and I've talked about Lincoln before, over the years, but I just never get tired of it. There's something about that time in history that really shaped who we are and as a nation, and even I think it affected the world too.
I agree.
And I want to jump right into it because, I'm going to show the book that you wrote, and check out her website. Lots of books, amazing books and historical figures that she has have written about. But like I said, on April 14th, Abraham Lincoln was shot, days after Robert E. Lee surrendered. But do you see that particular day as the final act of the Civil War or the beginning of something more covert and coordinated?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think definitely the war was over, but it was a very powerful, painful, sour note to the end of the Civil War. So it changed kind of the world's feeling about what had happened. And the victory couldn't really be enjoyed by the North, the United States, because this tragedy had occurred. And it set a tone, and also it sort of solidified this Southern desire to maintain their past the way they wanted to and their future. And it did. It played a role in kind of destabilizing the future of the country for many, many years.
I've watched a lot of Marvel movies, and they're always talking about timelines. And I mean, if Lincoln would have been assassinated a week before, how would that, in your opinion, how would have that changed the direction of the Civil War?
I think that it would have been more brutal and the Union would have won again. But the commitment on the part of generals and the Union soldiers would have been profoundly, it might have even been more vicious and a lot of resentment and anger. And the Confederacy was falling apart anyway. It had lost many of its soldiers. They were, leaving the lines. They were hiding out. They didn't want to be part of it anymore. So the South would not have won. They wouldn't have.
Wow. Yeah. And of course, when we talk about the conspiracy of the assassination, was most people focus on John Wilkes Booth, but who were the other key players behind him and that the public often overlooks.
Yeah, I
That's
agree with you. Even when we all went to school, we learned
that's
about
all we
John Wilkes
heard.
Booth. It was like the end of the first half of U.S. history you have in high school and then
Yeah.
or in college, and then John Wilkes Booth assassinates Abraham Lincoln. But it was it was a conspiracy. It was a thought out plot,
Hmm.
not so well thought out, but it did do what John Wilkes Booth wanted.
Hmm.
Um, it is surprising that there weren't that many people involved, and they were kind of like, a haphazard group, and they weren't very coordinated, very professional. Um, so that's even surprising too, even though Booth thought he had this great conspiracy pulled together, really it wasn't that well pulled together. And it was sort of like a Keystone Cops kind of group of
Right. Right.
fumbling people.
Right.
And that's kind of amazing that he did pull off the assassination and getting away until he was caught and
Yeah.
killed in Virginia.
It almost feels
Yeah.
like it was a Hail Mary. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
like what do we have to lose? We might as well. And there's other figures such as Lewis Powell, known as Lewis Payne, and George, and I never can pronounce his name right, Atzerodt.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Can you talk about their roles and how, and because some people don't even know that other officials were attempted in part of the assassination.
Yeah, right. I mean, John Surratt, I mean, he gets involved in it
Yeah.
and he's a Confederate through and through. They were most of these co-conspirators that were involved with John Wilkes Booth in the planning and execution of the assassination. They were Southern Marylanders, and
Mm,
that part of Maryland was definitely sympathetic to the Confederacy. There was a lot of spying going on there. There were spy networks and agents that were helping the Confederacy. Because they were close to Washington, D.C. and the Potomac, they could go across the Potomac into Virginia very easily. So it was an environment where being a Confederate sympathizer or even a Confederate was easy. It wasn't like being in Baltimore or
right.
Northern Maryland or Eastern or Northeastern Maryland. It was definitely a very comfortable zone for people who were dedicated to the Confederacy. So, these guys that were part of the conspiracy, John Surratt and his mother, Mary Surratt.
Hmm.
She's a big player in this. And this George Atzerodt, who's like a German immigrant guy. They're all kind of lower class working guys. Lewis Powell, who he comes out of like nowhere. He is a Confederate soldier who gets captured and he ends up, in a Confederate kind of prison, but he's let go and he goes to Baltimore and he immediately starts trying to get involved in doing something nasty. And he, meets John Surratt and the rest of the gang, and they go with John Wilkes Booth because they're all in. It is amazing that they pulled it off because
Yeah.
they were kind of not the smartest guys in the room.
Yeah.
But again, you don't need to be apparently to
No.
pull this kind of thing off. Yeah.
No. No. And I know another person that kind of his name has been thrown out there over the last 100 and some years, but David Harold, who also helped Booth escape.
Yeah.
What was his role, and does his involvement suggest more structure? And I know we said there wasn't really a lot of structure, but it
There
seems
was
like there
enough.
was a lot of players. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it was enough to get the job
Yeah.
done.
Yeah. Yeah. So there were enough connections. The smoothness that Booth had hoped for once he committed the assassination, that he could flee easily and race through southern Maryland and
Hmm.
then get on a boat with David Harold and go across to Virginia. He thought it would be a lot smoother, but he got injured when he shot Lincoln at Ford's Theater. Lincoln was there famously watching the play, and then Booth, shoots him, jumps down onto the stage, breaks his leg
Yeah.
supposedly, and races off and gets on a horse and tries to get down to Mary Surratt's former tavern boarding house that has been leased to another man, and he's kind of a mess. Things are sort of falling apart, but they're ahead of the authorities, so they're able to escape. But, when you have the Union Army, it's kind of hard to escape the Union Army.
Right.
And they were able to track him down and kill him. But it took 14 days or so for them
Which
to
was
catch
pretty
him.
amazing that he lasted that long.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The, now in 2026 and even before, we have Secret Service. Back then, even though the war was over, I'm surprised that President Lincoln wasn't protected more. It seemed like there was a lot of opportunities even time before that because there wasn't a lot of protection around him. Why was that?
I think it was partly him. I think there was an attempt or two before that were kind of muddled. And it was like when he traveled through Baltimore at one point, that was very dangerous for him.
Yeah.
So people were aware and they were watching, but they didn't have a Secret Service. That came later.
Right.
And even Union soldiers. I mean, there were Pinkerton was kind of came out of the Lincoln assassination
Right.
and things like that. So yeah, I guess we all need a moment that kind of changes the dynamic of a government, of history, and that was a moment. So after that, presidents were more likely to be protected. Although the Secret Service, I don't know the exact date that was started, but it took a while to be formalized and organized.
Yeah. Yeah. I know Vice President Johnson, I was surprised that Lincoln chose him, he was the vice president, and the Civil War or the direction of the freeing of the slaves stayed in the right direction. Why wasn't there more I'm trying to say this correctly, but why didn't he, because I know he wasn't necessarily in the same realm as Abraham Lincoln. Why did it keep going in the right direction even after he took over?
Well, a civil war had been fought to liberate enslaved people.
Right.
And I think that wasn't good. They weren't going to turn the nation around and go back after all those soldiers had fought and all those soldiers had died. I mean, now they estimate it's 800,000 soldiers died. So I think it was just a fait accompli. Fortunately, because the Congress at the time, Lincoln was a Republican, which was the liberal party at the time. They've switched now, but back then it was the Liberal Party, and they controlled the Senate and Congress, so they were able to push through legislation, the 13th Amendment ending slavery, the 14th Amendment giving citizenship and voting rights through the 15th Amendment. So that was a movement in the 5 years after the Civil War that wasn't going to slow things down. It was going to make sure that people of color were going to be free. And despite Johnson's distaste for it, he couldn't do much about it.
Thank God.
Yeah. I mean, he did other nasty things, but that's
right.
He couldn't do it all. Yeah.
You did speak about Mary Surratt. She had a huge place in history because I believe she was the first female to be executed.
Yes.
For the people
by the federal government.
Federal government. Yeah. But for the people watching, if you're listening, go over the YouTube channel. You can actually see it. That there was a picture of her and also of her being the hanging of her. But I'm surprised back then she had such influence because she was pretty central to the conspiracy and more kind of a leading into this conspiracy. So can you talk about her a little bit? Because
Yes,
again,
and
we
that
don't
too.
talk about her at all for
I
the
know.
mainstream.
So this is part of the problem with the writing of history and our historical memories. Women have not been elevated for all these years.
Right.
I mean, it is now since the late 1900s, the 1980s and 1990s, women's history became more of a thing. It became college courses, etc. So there's a lot of history where women are involved and they are important players and decision makers, but we don't know about them because we're trying to catch up for the 250 years before that, where it was
Right.
always written about the men, unless it was like the Queen of Sheba or something,
Right. Right.
or some queen. So it's not surprising that her story was not passed down, but she, like Andrew Johnson said, she kept the nest that hatched the terrible plot.
Yeah.
And so she aided and abetted. She kept a safe place for the co-conspirators along with Booth to plan and organize um, and feel safe and secure. And so it isn't surprising to me because I think women did a lot of this stuff in the Confederacy for the Union. The women
Hmm.
were always there supporting and doing what and spying and doing what they could. They did it during the American Revolution, so it's not surprising. The depths of her commitment, though, that really did surprise me. It did surprise me just how wicked she could be. She could be. um, but anyway, she did, and she hanged for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like her boarding house was really the meeting place, the headquarters of this plot.
It
And
was.
I was surprised because where was this actually located? Because was it in Washington,
It's a
D.C.?
Yeah, E Street in
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. Right now, it is a Chinese restaurant. You can go there
I'm surprised
and
they,
you can have really great food,
oh,
and there
wow.
are apartments upstairs, I believe. Yeah,
I'm surprised
yeah.
they didn't like make that a landmark. Maybe they will for the Chinese
Oh,
food later.
there's a plaque on the wall
Okay.
outside, like a historic marker, but you know, the food
Right.
is good.
Well, now I want Chinese food. Thank you very much. So the plot was put together, but these people definitely needed financing. Where did the financing come from? Because like you said, these weren't like overly rich, wealthy people.
That's
So
right.
where did they get this financing, and how did they keep this under wraps in the heart of Washington, D.C.?
Um, well, because there was a lot of Confederate sympathizers there, so it was easier. So
Oh.
in Southern Maryland, where Mary Surratt had her tavern and her property, and they first started getting involved with the Confederacy when the war started, is that they were Confederate sympathizers. And
Hmm.
in a kind of, on the countryside, it wasn't so difficult to hide out, and they had a tavern. And so spies could come from Virginia and pass on their messages at the bar and stay upstairs in the rooms. So that was easy. No one was going to tattle on them. But then it got kind of nerve-wracking because the Mary Surratt's husband died. He was a drunk and a terrible human being, but he died in 62. So young John Surratt, the son, took over the tavern, but he also became a spy and
Hmm.
he would take the messages from other spies and he got arrested, put in jail, and then he swore an oath to the United States and they let him free. And then he became a really big spy by traveling back and forth to Virginia, to New York City, to, different places, passing messages along. And that was possible in Maryland. It wasn't possible to do that necessarily in Pennsylvania or even Delaware. It happened, but nothing like Southern Maryland. It was just a little Confederate haven there. So that's how it was possible. And she nurtured it. That's what she
Yeah.
wanted. She did not, she believed in slavery and she wanted it to be perpetuated. And so she was willing to fight for it.
How long after the assassination was Mary and John? I know we know 14 days for John Wilkes Booth, but how long before it was all tied back to them?
Well, within 24 hours, they pretty much knew, and in 48 hours, they arrested her.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
People, yeah, knew. People were willing to give her up pretty quickly. And she goofed herself too, because I mean, there was just a sequence of events that happened and they all kind of collided at the same time. So she was arrested very quickly. That night that Lincoln was assassinated, the other co-conspirators were given assignments to murder other people, like General Ulysses Grant was supposed to be murdered, but he ended up going to New Jersey, so he couldn't be. They were going to attack the vice president,
Mm-hmm.
but that didn't happen. And then Lewis Payne or Lewis Powell, he had the two names, he did attack the Secretary of State, William Henry Seward, who was recuperating from a horrific carriage accident and at home with all these braces on his neck and his jaw.
Wow.
And he stabbed him and stabbed Seward's sons. And he went and hid out, Powell went and hid out in a cemetery for a couple of days. But he shows up at Mary's house Sunday night, 2 days after the assassination. The police had already been to the Surratt house and investigated, and she kind of like pushed them away and said, "Oh, I don't know what you're talking about." And, they're kind of nervous, these authorities, the police authorities, because it's a woman. What are you going to
Right.
do? So they're looking for a man. And so she got them to go away. But when they returned to her house Sunday night, and there, Lewis Powell knocks on the door while they're interrogating Mary Surratt, and he's a mess because he's been hiding in a cemetery and he's covered with mud and he's just gross. And they're like, "Well, who are you?" They open the door and he's like, "Oh, I'm supposed to do some work for Mrs. Surratt tomorrow morning, and I'm just checking in with her." And they're like, "Well, it's 11 o'clock at night. What are you doing here now?" And they made him come in the house, and they're like, "Mrs. Surratt, do you know who this person is?" And she's for a very smart woman, she did a really dumb
It's
thing.
my
She
son.
raises her hand up and says, "I swear to God, I have never seen this person before." And they were like, "Really? You're arrested."
Wow. Yeah. So they were very intelligent people. Just kidding.
It was just she just blew it. Anyway, she was arrested, and then the trial, and she just made it worse. Everything she did, she made it worse for herself. I don't know why. I don't understand her. I've thought about this since I researched the book, wrote it, and since then I just can't figure out how she could make so many bad choices that ended up in her being hanged.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if she wanted to go down in history, she sure did. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, she did. Yikes.
well, John Surratt Jr. Was embedded in this conspiracy, but do you feel that his embedment was more than Booth was? Even though, like I said, Booth gets pretty much all the attention, but was there like a ringleader other than, sounds like Mary had a big part in it too, but was there a ringleader?
Um, it's interesting. So the newspapers and journals at the time, when they drew all the pictures of the co-conspirators, they put Mary in the middle of it. And they'd have all the pictures of all the men, Booth and everybody else all
Mm-hmm.
around her, like she was the brains behind the whole thing. And in a way, she did make it comfortable and easy for them to conspire and plan at her house. Booth was the guy. But each of them, John Surratt was a smart kid and he knew how to make connections and make things happen. And fortunately for him, he was out of town when Booth did the assassination. So he got
Wow.
away and, he had a long story before he was finally arrested. But, you know, Mary just made a lot of bad choices and continued to do so right till the day of her hanging. She just made bad choices.
Yeah, right, right. And we, with all these conspirators tried and executed so in a kind of a quick succession of, but do you think the government was seeking truth or just closure?
I think it was both. They did get the truth. There's no question about that. They didn't get enough of the truth. There was more to be told. There were more people that should have been tried and convicted, not necessarily being hanged like Mary and the three other co-conspirators. Dr. Mudd, who was part of the plan, he was not executed, and there were several others. But there were more that had been arrested, but they were let go after the hangings. Uh, Johnson and the government decided we're done with this. We need to move on and repair and heal the nation. And so a lot of people who should have at least served a lot of jail time did not.
Hmm.
They just went free and kept that base of a neo-Confederate culture going for generations.
I'm sure after the fact, after these assassination attempts happened, I'm sure other people in Washington after the fact kind of had a sense of panic or urgency in Washington, because I'm sure I would be like, okay, who's next?
Yeah.
Was that the sense that you, doing your research, felt?
Yes. Yes. That there were people who were in a panic and they were trying to figure out where they were going to go. Now, before the end of the Civil War, if they felt that they were under suspicion, they might get arrested, they'd book it for Virginia. And that was okay, but there was no place to go. So everybody just kind of hung on and waited to see what was going to happen. And then when most of the people that had been arrested, including lots of women were arrested, were let go after the
Hmm.
hangings, everyone kind of relaxed and let it go
Wow.
and just kind of breathed a sigh of relief. And there was a lot of work to do, rebuilding and reorganizing the country. So everybody's focus changed.
Yeah, I just remember after 9/11, I'm sure the panic that Americans were even the world, but the Americans were feeling. We didn't know what was going to happen next. We didn't know if we were going to be attacked in Los Angeles or Seattle. I'm sure
Mm.
at the time there was a lot of people, like you said, trying to figure out how to get out of here, go back to homes, go back to hiding places.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, was the war going to start again?
right.
And Johnson, he did not want that again. He
Yeah.
didn't, he wanted to have a booming economy. He wanted to be the king and do whatever he could, even though he still sort of had those Southern sympathies, but yeah, he wasn't gonna let it return to civil war.
Do you think underneath of it all, he was happy of the assassination?
Well, he was another big ego guy,
Yeah.
so yeah, maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know that much about Johnson, just
Yeah.
his actions uh, after the war and the things that he did, the things that he resisted doing, but the Congress and the Senate wouldn't allow him. So, and then, Grant came in as
Yeah.
president and he helped stabilize everything.
Oh,
But then by the end of the 1870s, Jim Crow really takes a hand. And the Klan really was quite powerful after the Civil War. Yeah.
yeah. Well, good
So,
things we had checks and balances.
yes, we did. We did.
Yes, we did. Oh, the good old days. Some historians suggest that the conspiracies may have extended farther than the core group, possibly the Confederate intelligence networks. In your research, how credible is that, or has that been proven or disproven?
So I don't think the conspiracy was very big beyond. I mean, I
Oh,
think there were Confederates in Virginia who knew what was going on. Um, but as I was writing this book and I'm looking at this collection of guys around John Wilkes Booth,
mm-hmm.
you could see, I would imagine, Confederate officials around Jefferson Davis would be saying, do we really want to get involved with this kind
Right.
of ragtag group of folks? Like, what professional experience did John Wilkes Booth have other than being an actor? And he wants to assassinate the president.
Right.
So there's something kind of fantastical about the group that was thinking they were going to pull off this assassination. First, they were going to kidnap the president. They weren't going to assassinate him. But then the assassination. So I think that I'm not sure how deep the conspiracy went into Jefferson Davis's uh, group, or his presidency and his office. Um, and by the time the war ended, everyone was exhausted. I'm sure Jefferson Davis himself fled and was, wearing a woman's dress and outfit, trying to get away, and
Hey, what
he
you
was
do on the
captured.
weekends are none of my business.
Right. Yeah. So, I think the Confederacy was really falling apart, and I don't know how much we can really put a lot of faith in a vast conspiracy that was behind this, because they would not have chosen John Wilkes Booth and John Surratt and
Yeah.
David Harold and Lewis Payne. They would not have put those guys together. I don't
Right.
think.
Right. You're like, really? Really?
Yeah, and Mary Surratt, really?
Right.
A woman?
Right. A lot of these conspirators, they did give conflicting accounts. Who do you think was telling the truth and who was trying to protect someone else, in your opinion?
So I think Lewis Payne uh, felt great remorse up to a certain degree, and whatever he said about the conspiracy was pretty accurate, and he recognized it wasn't very big,
Hmm.
and it was just the few of them.
Wow.
Mary didn't tell the truth about anything, so she was not helpful.
And she
John
swore to
Surratt
God.
never, yeah, she swore to God that, she had that strong faith thing. Yeah, no. Um, uh, David Harold, they were all kind of like, you know, they didn't really know much, and they didn't know what to do with what they knew. And so yeah, I think Lewis Payne Powell probably told the most truth in his testimony. And that's what we have to go with mostly.
Did most of these conspirators, did they all grow up in the South, or were some of these mostly in the North?
Most of them were mid-Atlantic. They
Hmm.
weren't Northerners. They were mid-Atlantic. Virginia, mostly Maryland. Um, yeah,
That's fascinating that they weren't like
yeah.
deep South. Even deep South people didn't even, like you said, didn't like, hey, let's go up to Washington and
Right. Well, the logistics would have been difficult because
yeah,
they would have had to have traveled,
true,
and the
true.
war was coming to an end, and the infrastructure was falling apart.
Hmm.
Trains had all been blasted, and they would have had to have walked, or, it just would have been a huge,
Yeah,
complicated journey. And then who do you trust once you get there?
true.
How do you make connections if you're from South Carolina? It's hard. Yeah. But you're in Maryland, you're right around DC, you know
Yeah.
how to make connections, you know who's got the boat that can take you across the Potomac, that kind of thing. So,
And all your research, I mean, and viewers and listeners, this lady does her research. Like I said, go look, read her books, pick up her books. You can go to KateCliffordLarson.com, and even I'm sure on Amazon or wherever you get your books.
yeah.
But of all your years of research, what unanswered questions about this conspiracy are still frustrating people like you, or is everything answered?
Oh, no, no. Everything isn't answered. There's so much, there were people that were protecting this ragtag group of co-conspirators. And I'd like to know more about the extension of that kind of protection. And I wouldn't call them part of the conspiracy, but they were protected, and why. And even
Yeah.
after the Civil War, and it was clear this group of people did plan and execute assassinating Abraham Lincoln. But
Hmm.
right after his assassination, right after the trial and the hangings, it was like all of a sudden people started saying, "Oh, they weren't really guilty. It didn't really happen." And it was kind of
Sounds
bizarre.
like now.
And yeah, it is. It's very strange.
Yeah.
It is stunning. And people spent like 30 years trying to prove and saying they had proof that
Yeah.
this didn't really happen the way they said it did. But they never presented the proof. And then through the early 1900s, people carried that forward as well.
Wow.
And it was like, yeah, it's weird. It's very weird.
Okay. Ooh.
And it wasn't until the 1970s when a group of people, um, historians and others, started doing the research and collecting the primary documents, and the Surratt house became a historic site,
Mm-hmm.
and people became interested in creating a library of documents, and they uncovered a lot of information that people hadn't looked at since the assassination. So I'm grateful to them, and some of them are still alive.
That's
And
amazing.
they did a good job making sure that people could just see the real documents, and some stuff they uncovered in the 1970s that had been lost for, 100 years. And they
Wow.
found, the handwritten documents and stuff,
That's
sworn
amazing.
testimony, interviews, things like that. Yeah.
I we was talking about where we live now. I moved out here close to Redlands, California. I don't know if you've ever been here or know much about it.
No.
There is. I was totally shocked. I'm a person. I like to get in my car and just drive around the. You have people like have been born and raised here, and they're like, I don't know where that's at. I do
Where
because
is that?
I'm just that person. But they in the middle of the city, next to the library, in the early 1900s, there was a wealthy man, and his son went off to war, World War I, and he was killed. And so, but his son's hero was Abraham Lincoln. Well, they built this shrine and museum to Abraham Lincoln.
Oh my gosh.
It's fascinating. You walk in, it's all these historical, people have donated, and I'm sure they get them from other museums. Abraham Lincoln, even though, it's been this many years and we don't know much about the 15th president, we don't know much about the 18th president, all these presidents in between, we don't know much about, but Abraham Lincoln made such an impact on this country
Yeah.
in bringing us together, even though there was a war that brought us together.
Yeah.
Why do you look at Lincoln and say this was a great man?
Because he was a flawed man, but he ended up doing the right thing, getting rid of slavery.
Yeah.
He wasn't so sure about that. He had to be sort of convinced to end slavery, and he did it.
Wow.
And that took a lot of courage. And he set the country on a new path, even though it was choppy and ugly and messy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he set us on a path really dedicated to freedom and equality and justice and self-determination, the qualities that the founding fathers said that they were devoted to and wanted to create this free country based on. And Lincoln made that possible.
Mm.
Mm.
If Lincoln would have lived, how do you feel America would be even greater? Or do you feel the road would have been a little less tough for especially African American people?
I think it would have been a little less tough, because the pushback happened so quickly after he died.
Right,
Even
right.
though we had Reconstruction, through the early 1870s, so that Black people could vote,
Mm.
but the forces against that equality were so powerful, and there was no figurehead like a Lincoln that could still stand up and say, no, we have to do this. Grant tried to do it, but the nation just was not into it. And there was no way to address the racism and the desire to subjugate a whole class of people. And we needed a leader like a Lincoln to do that. We didn't have it.
Do you ever think you wish you could go back and just sit across the table from like Mary or some of these conspirators just to ask them questions?
No.
She's like, no.
No. You know, with all my other books and the people that I've written about, I'd love to be able to sit with Harriet Tubman 5 minutes, a minute. That's all I would want.
Wow.
Or, you know, Rosemary Kennedy. I would just like to hear her voice and talk to her and see her smile um, and Fannie Lou Hamer. Oh my gosh, she was a Harriet Tubman, but 100 years later. I would love to have met her. But Mary Surratt, honestly, I would not want to talk to her. And when I decided to write the book, I thought she was innocent. And that's why I
Really?
decided to write the book. And then I started the research and I was like, uh-oh, she was
Wow.
guilty, guilty, guilty. So it was a really hard book to write because I didn't like her. I don't like her. Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. You thought she was innocent before
I
that.
thought she was innocent. Yeah,
Isn't that
because she
funny
wasn't.
when the truth is, the old saying is, shall set you free? Um,
Yeah.
but because I think a lot of people, they get an idea of somebody good or bad. And sometimes when you find out the truth, that it's like the old man, the cranky old man on the corner that, you know, everybody that kind of avoids because he seems cranky, but behind the scenes, he's given away his millions to
Yeah.
help people.
Yeah.
If you
A
just
war
know,
veteran that's just trying to do good every day,
yeah,
but cranky. Yeah.
but then you get people that, you know, the preacher, and then you find out many bad things that they have
Yeah.
done. I just think should be thankful for people like yourself that are love history, because history sometimes, if you don't notice, people don't really, they just take the word of other people.
Right.
They don't,
Right.
they don't, and it's not the people like you, it's the people that just, hey, yeah, the Native American, the Indians were savages. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just, growing up, now that I've done something like this where I've interviewed a lot of people and I've got to learn for myself and learn through people like you that not everybody's bad, but not everybody's good either.
Yeah. Yeah. And also it's important for people who want to write and do this kind of work. You have to do the primary research. Do not rely on AI. AI
Oh
is
my
such
gosh.
a mess. I mean, there are a lot of great things that it works with in science, etc.
Yeah.
But when it comes to history, it doesn't know what it's doing. It doesn't know what it's doing.
Wow.
So do the research, find those primary documents, interview people. Yeah, you've got to do it based on that.
Yeah, I love, and that's why I say I thank people like you, because most of us don't have the time, energy, or effort, or even the
Mm.
want to do that, and so it's great that people like you. All right, my last question: after all your research into this conspiracy and its players, I mean, there was a lot of players. Do you believe justice was truly served, or did the nation and its grief and urgency need someone to pay the price, such as the John Wilkes Booth?
I think justice was mostly served. John Surratt, the son, he should have gone to prison for a long time, but he did not.
Mm,
And that's a great regret, I think, that people at the time had and afterwards. And I think he should have gone to jail.
wow.
But he got away with it, basically. Yeah, not right. Not right at all.
Well, now I'm exhausted. No, just kidding. But I'm exhausted because I love this stuff. I love history. History was a minor in college. I
Oh,
just think history is important. If you
mm,
don't know your history, it will repeat itself. And
mm.
I think we're seeing that in a lot of ways in our current situation. But we have people like you that can remind us, and we thank you for that.
Thank you.
People can, I'm sure, want to reach out to you, or maybe want to hear you speak, or tell us where people can find you, find out what you're doing, new books coming out.
Yeah, I'm working on a new book on Bobby and Ethel Kennedy and their marriage,
Oh my gosh,
18-year
that's going to be
marriage.
good.
I know. I can't wait. It's so exciting. But KateCliffordLarson.com, and there's a contact button there. You can reach out to me if you want to contact me.
All right. Well, thank you, Miss Kate. I appreciate it. Or Dr. Kate,
Tony.
excuse me. But thank you. I really appreciate you for taking the time and sharing
I appreciate it too.
the knowledge with us. And as you can see, there was a lot of money involved, especially back then. But for all the people that tuned in for Truth Be Told every Friday, listening to these amazing guests that I bring on, a lot of these people are suggested from you guys. So I'd really love to hear more about your take on the Civil War, President Lincoln, and his conspirators that, unfortunately assassinated him. So I'd love to hear more from you. But until next time, please subscribe, like, share these shows. And I love you guys for supporting us for all these years. Please take care of yourself and each other. Take care.